Super Smash Bros. Ultimate was a miracle of a game, a Herculean accomplishment that somehow brought back every Smash fighter ever. How did they get the rights to Falco? And then they added another 24 characters on top of that. This juggernaut roster is an all-time spectacular accomplishment, and it's the second greatest crossover in gaming history, after Fortnite, obviously. And oh God, is it bloated. With little left to say about Ultimate and a new Nintendo console on the horizon, Smash speculation this time has taken an interesting turn. Sure, there's still newcomer wish lists, but because Ultimate was such a magic trick and will be so hard to top, many people have started imagining, what if we did a purge? A Thanos snap? Let's delete half the roster and bury them in shallow graves, for fun! Ultimate is a beautiful garden, but it's overgrown and full of weeds, so there's a trend of taking the Ultimate roster and slicing it down the middle. It's a mildly fun and almost interesting thought experiment. How does one reduce such a roster? Just about every face on the roster is a beloved icon, and removing them would break people's hearts, or make them mad on the internet. So the selection process is like a Rorschach test that tells you what matters to each Smash fan. Do we value fun, gaming legacy, Smash legacy, the competitive metagame, or do we just think that Diddy Kong deserves a bullet right in the middle of his doofy looking mono eye? With 89 characters who could be cut, there's so many ways to halve the cast. Surely we can't reach a consensus, right? Because I'm too cowardly to post my own mild opinions and risk being yelled at for keeping Lucina, instead of joining the trend myself, I sought out every single cut roster I could find on YouTube.com. Big name YouTubers to tiny channels, filthy casuals to sweaty tryhards, thoughtful analysis to cheeky shitposts, it didn't matter. I found 70 takes on cutting the Smash roster in 69 videos and I analysed them all. If we could smooth out the bias and extinguish the hot takes, what would be the average? What would be the community's perfect cut down Smash roster? But first, some ground rules on the methodology, timestamps in description if you want to skip around. Every roster will be treated as one vote and will be treated equally. Every vote matters and nobody gets special treatment. So for instance, Scott the Woz and Alpharad are two of the biggest YouTubers here, but because they collabed to come up with one single roster, they effectively each get half a vote. Mr. Wozniak and Mr. Arad's combined roster will be given the exact same weight as Ness the Random Guy's roster, because we don't care about anyone's subscriber counts, or that Ness is just a random guy. Similarly, the Luminosity Gaming video had a roster made by some of the best talent that competitive Ultimate has to offer, but because it's just one roster, MKLeo, Tweak, Sonic's, Mars and Meister's roster will be worth exactly as much as this person putting text on screen while playing Among Us. I'd like to apologise to Alpharad for using him as clickbait and then only counting his vote as half. The data also does not make any judgments based on the intent put into a roster. The spreadsheet does not care if someone was trolling, or listing the characters that annoy them on Elite Smash, or prioritising gaming icons or Nintendo characters, or women and children first, or if they genuinely think that Super Mario should die. Most of the rosters seem to have been made in good faith, so even with some curveballs like the guy who just copy-pasted the Brawl roster over the Ultimate character select screen, the average should still smooth out and give us some insights into what a general consensus might look like. Some of these roster cut videos were made before all the DLC was out, which seems weird to me. It's like vomiting your meal before dessert is served, but whatever, you do bulimia however you want, King. In the event that a video was from the before times, before Minecraft Steve attacked, I will be treating every DLC character that the video maker didn't know about as neither cut or uncut, like Schrodinger's penis. So the data will be neutral towards him. So even though someone like Shokio here says he dislikes all third-party characters in Smash in his video, I will not extend that hatred to Hero or Banjo, etc., because he didn't know about them, and I'm not going to make any assumptions. We simply don't know. Some of the rosters examined cut more than half a roster, and some cut less than half. I think this should be fine, because either way, it's data we can use for or against each fighter. It's not ideal, but it's statistical noise that should average out, and having more data points is better than having fewer. That being said, if a video cut more than half, but also clearly had a point where the roster is halved, such as the videos by Gwall Pro or Delzaphin, I used the halved roster. But if a video cuts more than half without that unmistakable halfway point, then I'd count every cut as a cut, such as this video by Channel Balake, which aimed to reduce the roster down to Melee's size, or this video by Revere, which cuts the roster down to just one character. somebody hurt you, Revere? Do you just really like that one character? Why did you do that? Next, some people, looking at you, Dabuz, annoyingly tried to have thoughtful and nuanced takes, and would do something like split the roster into several tiers. This forced me to make some judgment calls. So for instance, Dabuz's maybe tier and mix and match tier I considered neutral, and counted as neither votes for or against a fighter. His back but with a revamp tier, and very exclusive keep puff for H-box tiers counted as votes in favour of someone staying, but his want revamp but not a priority returning character tier counted as someone being cut. And I didn't want to do that to Kirby, but Dabuz made me do it. So, with those rules in place and my 69 videos analysed, I thought I had everything set and our community roster was decided. But this story has a surprise villain. Just when I finished the thumbnail and went to work on this script, a 70th video hit my recommended feed. From a small channel called Volderami, a video called The Worst Way to Cut the Smash Roster in Half. As you'd expect, this video sets out to deliberately twist the thought exercise and make the worst, least satisfying lineup possible, which deliberately flies in the face of what I'm trying to find out here. So I could ignore that video and keep my data pure and keep my funny 69 videos number, but I promised myself that every vote matters. Every roster I saw would count, and no judgments would be made based on intention. It would be dishonest as a statistician to not include this roster, even if it's deliberately pissing in the water supply. With that final twist roster integrated into the dataset, we had everything we need to make our roster. Just don't drink the tap water. Also, as I go, we might spotlight some of the quirky takes, but please do not harass any of these channels. We're all just having fun. It's beautiful that this trend allows us to see so many opinions or angles how to cut the roster, and we appreciate every creator here equally. Seriously. Alright, with over 70 of YouTube's finest minds weighing in, we have what might be, but probably isn't, the perfect community consensus on how to cut the Smash roster in half. We'll alternate between fighters who made the cut and fighters who didn't, just to keep things suspenseful for those final swing state spots in the middle of the pack where the race is tightest. Or you can ruin all the drama and skip to the end. First up, the absolute safest character, our community's near unanimous favourite, the heart of Smash Brothers and the spirit of video games himself. Obviously, our first roster pick is going to be Shigeru Miyamoto's very own Donkey Kong! The only votes Donkey Kong had against his name were from the roster that cut everyone except one fighter, the roster that deliberately tried to be the worst possible roster, and MKLeo? That's right, I can't believe it either. The greatest Ultimate player of all time was the only person to deliberately point the gun at Donkey Kong. Why, Leo? You're both kings. Why can't our goats coexist? As for the first cut, the least popular character, the most condemned soul of them all, it's Corrin! Not a huge surprise, one of 8 Fire Emblem characters in Smash, Corrin was blatantly added as a promotional pick, and unlike Byleth, the game Corrin was promoting wasn't particularly popular or well liked, so the inclusion didn't age well. On top of that, Corrin himself is a charisma vortex. Despite being a magic dragon princess with a chainsaw sword, they just aren't a very interesting person.
Good!
Who wanted to keep Corrin, you ask? My nemesis, Volderami, with his worst roster, and a fascinating roster by Blastbox that aimed to cut characters only based on Smash cutting precedent, and statements by Sakurai on why characters were cut in the past. He almost seemed apologetic that Corrin didn't meet any of the criteria to be removed. Lastly, a guy named Kevin wanted to keep Corrin because he liked Corrin in this game, which, honestly, valid. Corrin is fun. Still, Corrin might be the ocean's grey waves, but they're the Smash roster's grey sludge, and they're out of here. Next, to make our roster, we have a 4-way tie. Link, Samus, Bowser, and Ganondorf, some of Nintendo's greatest heroes and villains. Unsurprisingly, the votes against these 4 included the worst roster again, and the roster with only one character. Samus, Bowser, and Ganondorf also didn't make the cut on a roster that only had 20 characters, while Link was passed on a couple of times for either Young Link or Toon Link. Our gameplay purist Kevin cut Samus because of Wi-Fi, and Smash content creator Mars apparently hates Bowser. Ganondorf's history as a Captain Falcon knockoff came back to haunt him, as that meant he didn't meet the criteria for Blastbox's Smash Cut Precedent video, where all clones were cut. This meant that Ganondorf was the only character who was never really deliberately personally targeted, and was only ever cut as a victim of circumstance. Hashtag Ganondorf did nothing wrong. Our next 4 cuts are Young Link, Pichu, Piranha Plant, and Dr. Mario. Young Link, Pichu, and Dr. Mario all suffer from being derivative of Nintendo's biggest icons. As for the Pop Plant, one of the few votes in favour of Piranha Plant was Shokio, who glared at the camera and said nothing about Plant. I don't think he likes Piranha Plant, but I said I wouldn't make assumptions, and his description said anyone he didn't talk about was okay in his book, so it's a vote for Plant. This is the face of the Plant Gang's strongest defender. DeBuzz suggested that Pichu and Pikachu, who is our next character to make the roster, by the way, be fused into some kind of hybrid rat. In his wisdom as the smartest man in competitive Smash, DeBuzz felt that Pikachu would benefit a lot from hurting himself to cut down on Thunder Jolt and Quick Attack's oppressiveness. He's not wrong, but it's funny to imagine Pikachu forced to self-flagellate as penance for his crimes. After Pikachu, we finally have Super Mario joining the roster. Yahoo! Mr. Nintendo received some targeted assassinations on the tier lists I examined. Voice actor and skitman ProZD cut Mario deliberately in favour of his main, Dr. Mario. Similarly, my countrymen Director Cogger and Lil Zed took turns choosing who lives and dies in a high-stakes game of Smashdown, and opted for the Doc over his blue-collar alter ego. These two were 2 of the biggest channels I looked at, so if you want to make it big as a YouTuber, all you have to do is be willing to kill Super Mario. Kirby tied with Mario, only falling victim to our usual suspects, Elite Smash's greatest defender Kevin, and DeBuzz's unfortunate low priority tier. Our next cut is our first Echo fighter, Ken Masters. Surprisingly, the most unique Echo is the first to go. In general, people approached Echo fighters with many different approaches. Often there'd be the first characters deleted, sometimes they'd be grandfathered in along with their source characters, and sometimes they'd get reduced back down to skins. Many times it'd sort of be like bodyguards yelling, "Get down, Mr. President," before taking a bullet for their source. In Ken's case, I think he suffered a lot from being third party, being hard to play, and being so obviously second fiddle to Ryu as a gaming icon. Next, we'll cut Bowser Jr. I'm pretty sure he scored the same as all of his Koopaling skins, but it's possible someone out there saved Larry specifically, and I missed it. After BJ, we have a tie between the Wii Fit Trainer and Dark Pit. I like Wii Fit Trainer a lot, and even with Wii Fit's tremendous sales, she clearly feels like a joke character, only now the joke is 11 years old, and her perfect form means her yoga poses are some of the series' most stilted animations in a game filled with big cartoony attacks. She also has a clear potential successor for a Smash fighter in the form of the Ring Fit trainee. Going into this, I would have guessed Dark Pit would have been one of the very first to go, but I think being an Echo fighter was something of a blessing for him, with many rosters choosing to keep the category around. Still, surprised he edged out Ken. Our next saves are a 5-way tie between Fox McCloud, Captain Falcon, Marth, Sonic the Hedgehog, and the Inklings. Fox and Falcon are fan favourites, and both have a case as the face of Smash itself, but both of their home franchises aren't exactly Nintendo's crown jewels. Interestingly, Alpharad and Scott Bawaz wanted both of them gone for their collab roster, and ProZD was willing to put Fox down, proving again that these big YouTubers are willing to make the ultimate sacrifices in the name of content. Marth surviving isn't a surprise. As much flack as Fire Emblem and Smash gets, Marth is the original anime sword fighter, and is a Smash staple because of it, an icon of the platform fighter genre. Sonic the Hedgehog, on the other hand, performed incredibly well considering how divisive his actual Smash gameplay is, and that he's a third-party character, which tended to be a big debuff on these rosters. It's a testament to his legacy as a gaming icon, and just how big of a deal it is to this very day that he gets to cross over with Nintendo. He just feels like he belongs in Smash, although I will note that even the worst possible roster kept him around, because his gameplay is just that degenerate. As for the Inklings, they're a no-brainer. They felt like a natural fit for Smash as soon as Splatoon debuted, and they've cemented themselves as Nintendo icons. Next to go, we have Lucas, Richter Belmont, Toon Link, and Incineroar. Not surprising to see Lucas go, considering his similarities to Ness, and that he's from a Japan-exclusive game. The guy playing Among Us said he'd only include Lucas if Nintendo localized Mother Free, and only include Wario if Nintendo added Waluigi. But his final roster included both of them, so his votes counted towards Lucas and Wario. I guess he was feeling optimistic. It's a little surprising to see Richter do better than Ken, seeing as both of them are third-party Echo fighters, and Ken offers more unique gameplay, but this is because Richter was actually chosen over Simon a few times, while the only time Ken made it over Ryu was that infamous worst possible roster. Toon Link outperforming Young Link so decisively is an interesting data point, because going into this, I would have assumed it would be neck and neck between them, but either way, both of them are still very much cut. And poor Incineroar. A tragic case of one of the coolest, funnest movesets on one of the most charismatically animated characters not being enough because of who that character is. The 10th Pokemon and the second fully evolved fire starter to join Smash. It's hard to justify Incineroar as a must-have Smash fighter. Heck, I've even made a video mauling about Incineroar not deserving to be here, and I love Incineroar in Smash. Our Himbo Kitty might have had 9 lives, but he was killed 58 times. Next to make our roster is Luigi. Congratulations, Luigi. After him, we have a tie between Princess Peach and Princess Zelda, which feels about right. I can't believe they both lost to Sonic the Goddamn Hedgehog, but both princesses feel like incredibly obvious inclusions. Then we round out the original 8 with Yoshi. Not surprised to see him lowest of the original bunch, because he does feel like he has the most unorthodox moveset of that crew, and even though he's in Smash as a Yoshi series character, let's face it, he's a Mario character, and Mario already has a lot of representation. Terry Bogard is next to go, tying with father-daughter duo Chrom and Lucina. Terry's an interesting one. Yeah, he's an oddball, and he definitely feels non-essential, but did you see how much love Sakurai put into this dude? How much work was put into his stage? How many songs we got? I'm pretty sure SNK would give Terry the green light to rejoin Smash until the end of time, but yeah, makes sense he's gone. As for Chrom and Lucina, both are echoes and both are among Smash's 8 Fire Emblem characters, and the Fire Emblem game they do represent has a third fighter in Smash with a unique moveset as it is. Not surprised to see the Awakening Lords put to sleep. Back to the living. Wario makes the roster. In fact, Wario was the character I kept alluding to on Revere's roster that cut everybody in Smash except for a single survivor. Sorry to spoil the outcome, but his video is still a fun watch to see his reasoning. If you think that roster shouldn't have counted in our data, well, if we remove it, the only change is that Wario is now below.
Ness!
The boy from Earthbound is perhaps the greatest example of what Smash Bros can do to a franchise. Earthbound went from the depths of obscurity to a cult classic, largely due to this large-headed boy making the roster of every single Smash Bros game. PK Fire might be annoying, but it was far from enough to keep him away. After Ness is Pit, who would tie with Wario if not for Revere being Wario's greatest soldier. Pit feels like a similar Smash Bros success story to Ness, going from a dormant NES series to getting a makeover for Brawl, and a fully fleshed out sequel game by Smash's very own director. Anyway, dead people. Goodbye Dark Samus and goodbye Daisy. 2 more Echo Fighters and 2 more expected cuts. But then we have the Ice Climbers. Nana specifically would actually be between Dark Samus and Daisy in our dataset, while Popo is ahead, tying with Zero Suit Samus. The culprit behind this? Who else but that worst possible roster, which had the tenacity to split the pair? You monster. This is big YouTube drama now. Me and Volderami are beefing. The gloves down, buddy. What are you gonna do? Not much to say about ZSS, except that for the longest time, the only person I could find that kept her was professional Zero Suit main Mars. It doesn't matter how many times he said ZSS sucks, when the chips were down, he was there for her. It's beautiful. A win for negging, I guess. But in the end, 15 more channels would join Mars in her defense. Anyway, in another win for the big boys, King DDD is on our roster. Ridley too. He might have once been seen as too big for Smash, but now that he's here, the community rallies behind him. Even Shokio, channel who, back in the day, was the outspoken advocate against Ridley,
Ridley is big as shit!
gave him a begrudging thumbs up. That probably sounds like gibberish to most of you, but if you were following Smash 4 Ridley speculation, this is a big character arc. Lucario and Sheik, however, do not get a redemption arc. Lucario's gimmicky playstyle, tiny player base, and similarities to Mewtwo were enough to get rid of him, and Sheik might have a much cooler playstyle than Zelda, but she's very difficult to play effectively, and is fundamentally just a one-off ninja variant of the iconic princess. So, it's no surprise to see her disappear into a puff of smoke. Next, we save Pac-Man and Shulk in a tie. Xenoblade is niche, but has proven to have staying power. As one of Nintendo's newer IPs, Shulk makes a ton of sense as a Smash mainstay, which is saying something considering when he was first revealed, Sakurai said that Shulk wasn't the type of character that would usually appear in the Smash Bros. Series. As for Pac-Man, he is a foundational video game icon, and even though he's third party, his company literally develops the modern Smash games. But that Bandai Namco connection wasn't enough to save
Kazuya Mishima.
whose complicated zero-to-death riddled moveset was enough for the Smash community to throw him into a volcano. Not surprised by this one. Tying with Kazuya, however, was the biggest surprise of the whole roster for me, Palutena. Despite being first party from a series that Sakurai worked on, having a unique moveset that's strong but not even gimmicky anymore, and having a large player base, it wasn't enough to save the Goddess of Light, who finds herself cut before any Star Fox character and 5 different Fire Emblem fighters. I just didn't expect her to go so soon. The Smash community said no gods, only men. Or should I say, only monkeys, because Diddy Kong is our next survivor. Your disgusting eyeball is safe this time, monkey. Diddy is followed closely by Charizard. It wouldn't be the first time Charizard has been split up from the other Pokemon Trainer Pokemon, but people yearn for the Rock Smash. It was a little tricky to evaluate Pokemon Trainer of its data, because some people treated them as one fighter, and others as a trio. Some people explicitly called for a trainer to make the roster, but for the lineup of Pokemon to be completely changed. I focused on the 3 separate Pokemon in the end. Min Min and Duck Hunt are gone. All my arms, heads, and duck bros out there, we lost. We lost. And we have another franchise loss, the iconic Rob franchise. Rob the robot saved the video game industry, but the MASH community would not save him. MASH community? Next to be saved is a surprising tie between Olimar and Alf. The final tally will count them as just one character, but we did have one roster where Alf was cut, but Olimar wasn't for some reason. But then the pesky worst possible roster cut Olimar, but kept Alf, ultimately putting the 2 spacemen back in the same position anyway. After them, we have Ryu and then Mega Man. These 2 Capcom mascots make perfect sense in Smash, and fit like a glove. Being third party in general was a bit of a debuff among many of these rosters, but it certainly wasn't enough to stop these 2 returning. Back to the chopping block, we say goodbye to Rosalina and Luma. Honestly, I'm surprised Rosalina held out this long, well outperforming Piranha Plant and Bowser Jr., and trumping fellow Smash 4 Celestial Lady Palutena. I didn't expect her to do this well, considering her puppeteer playstyle has made her so niche that I'm pretty sure the only times I've ever seen Rosalina gameplay has been at the hands of DeBuzz. I'm not even fully convinced that I've unlocked her. Still, dead is dead, and we close the book on Rosalina. From one of the rarest characters to one of the most popular, we also say goodbye to Wolf. I've heard many people say that Ultimate Wolf is a perfectly designed Smash character, but that wasn't enough to stop the space animal from being jettisoned out the airlock. While we're at it, next is another tie, and we removed 2 sword fighters, Roy and Mii Sword Fighter. Roy held out remarkably long, considering he's a Fire Emblem fighter who is derivative of Marth, which is a testament to just how fun he is. As for the Miis, usually on these rosters they would be bundled together, but not always, and Mii Sword Fighter was the least picked by a wide margin. Unsurprisingly, our old friend the worst roster was the only one to keep Sword Fighter and cut the other 2. Next we save Meta Knight. The Kirby characters performed incredibly well in these rosters. This trio feels almost as tight and mandatory as the Triforce users. Meta Knight tied with Ivysaur of all fighters. Naturally, the worst roster is partly to blame for Ivysaur outperforming Squirtle, but he wasn't the only culprit. Dust TV cut Squirtle and kept Ivysaur and Charizard because he wants to swap Squirtle for Blastoise. As for Ivysaur, he had this to say.
Pokemon.
His video was part of his series Unfolded, which covers pop culture.
Whether it be games, movies, or books, I got you covered.
But I checked his channel, and where are the book reviews? Dust TV, I thought you had me covered.
What did you think of The Great Gatsby?
Anyway, Falco is cut, Sephiroth is cut, Mithra, you're gone. Cloud, on the other hand, is saved. He was a momentous addition to Smash, and while it seems that Square Enix is one of the more difficult third-party companies for Nintendo to negotiate with, it's clear that the people would love for him to return, even if bringing back Sephiroth as well would feel a little too indulgent. And surprisingly, also safe is Minecraft Steve. Despite being a technical nightmare to implement and a competitive menace, people still hope to see this strange blocky man return. He's undeniably a gaming icon, so it's easy to see why. Between Steve and Sonic, it's clear that people value Smash as a gaming hall of fame over being a spectator-friendly esport. You hear that, competitive players? Better learn to fucking match up. If the people get their way, you're in for a long ride. Sticking with the living, we finally round out Pokemon Trainers lineup and save Squirtle. As a Pokemon Trainer main, I love Democracy. Though, I'm kind of on board now for swapping him out for Blastoise. That kid was spittin'. Mewtwo also survives, which isn't surprising considering how upset people were when he was cut for Brawl. He became the most wanted Smash character. And tying with Mewtwo is Villager, who seems shockingly low considering Animal Crossing has cemented itself as a flagship franchise for Nintendo following New Horizons. A lot of people's rosters only brought back Villager or Isabelle, so they cannibalized each other's votes a fair bit, so that might explain it. Especially for this hypothetical Thanos snap exercise, when a franchise had two characters, often one would live and one would die to balance the cosmic scales. Animal Crossing just happened to have the most split vote. Only 8 rosters cut Animal Crossing entirely, which means the franchise would be just behind Inkling and tied with Luigi. Anyway, Sans is dead. Mii Gunner stayed ahead of Mii Swordfighter and was even picked as the only Mii more than once. Sans specifically was cited as a reason to keep Gunner, but the funny meme skeleton wasn't enough to save Mii Gunner from the boneyard. And then we cut Pyra. Generally people kept Pyra and Mythra as a pair, but Pyra trumped Mythra a couple of times. One person suggested removing Mythra, toning down Pyra's power, and increasing her speed, which to me just sounds like making the most sourceless sword fighter in the game even less flavorful. We finally cut the last Mii. Brawler is dead. Even Esam cut his new main. I think Brawler's rushdown gameplay has proven to be the most popular, and as a creator fighter, fist fighting is a better generic blank slate than a sword fighter or a gunner, so it makes sense that Brawler survived the culling more often than their counterparts. Plus, they can be the creeper from Minecraft. Rest in peace, you beautiful soul. Mr. Game & Watch is our next survivor, and good for him. I had no idea where the cards would fall for him, but in the end, the quirky little history lesson survived being cut. Even though cutting his 2D ass would be so easy. He's basically paper, begging for scissors. But he lived. After Game & Watch, the people saved the final member of the original 12, Jigglypuff. On one hand, Jigglypuff is a legacy character, a unique gameplay niche, and an unmistakable part of Smash history. On the other hand, she's far from the most important Pokemon or a gaming icon, and she seems to be the most expendable of the Smash 64 crew. Heck, I think a lot of people cut her just to make the point that even Smash's sacred cows shouldn't be safe. But in the end, she's comfortably on our roster. Perhaps deep down everyone was like the Buzz, and did it for Hungrybox. I was surprised by the fighter that tied with Jigglypuff. Robin. Despite a tiny player base and being a Fire Emblem fighter, Robin was saved. Generally, it seems like Robin survived due to their unique moveset, using magic to stand out from the other Fire Emblems, and a recognition that Awakening was an important enough game to deserve a fighter. If Palutena was the cut I was most surprised by, Robin was the survivor I didn't expect. Good for them. Next to go are both Joker and Banjo and Kazooie, a flashy third-party RPG character who almost nobody expected, and a much-requested fan favourite whose moveset didn't really click for most people. I could have seen either of these two making it, but you can sort of see why the scales of fate turned against them. Now we have 11 fighters left, 5 survivors, 5 casualties, and someone stuck in limbo. This is where things get really volatile, and the votes really matter. At this point, the data is so turbulent that any configuration could have happened, and there's no shame in being cut, and even less shame in not being cut. First of our final survivors is King K. Rool. K. Rool always felt like one of Ultimate's most triumphant newcomers, being a fan favourite whose implementation oozed charm and is incredibly fun to play, so it's nice to see the people continue to rally behind the crocodile. But going to the other side, we have 2 more cuts. Another tie. Ike and Sora have fallen. Sora might have won the Smash ballot, but the polls aren't in his favour this time. And similarly, Ike might have won the 1952 US presidential election, but the polls aren't... Wait a minute. Why was he called Ike? His name was Dwight David Eisenhower. Where the fuck does Ike come from? Anyway, he's dead. Next to make it, it's
Hero time!
The RNG-based Dragon Quest fighter defies the odds yet again, even though all the rosters I analysed were in English, which, as I say it out loud, isn't ideal, but a lot of them did recognise what a big deal Dragon Quest was, and believed the Luminary and his pals deserved to keep their spot in Smash. We also saw Greninja survive, which is an interesting one. A lot of people cited Greninja's status as the most popular Pokemon, based on that one Google poll from a few years back. but I don't think that poll was done very well. That poll asked people their favourite Pokemon generation by generation, which meant that Pokemon like Charizard, Pikachu, Mewtwo, Snorlax, Eevee, Bulbasaur and Gengar were all competing against each other and 144 other Pokemon. Meanwhile, Greninja still had some stiff competition like Aegislash, Sylveon and Hawlucha, but only had about 70 Pokemon it was competing with overall. If every Pokemon was created equal, Greninja still probably would have gotten double the votes of any Gen 1 or Gen 5 Pokemon because he just had less competition. But I think Greninja won that poll so decisively just because he had a smaller, easier bracket. He was a big frog in a little pond. I don't think it was a great way of doing a survey. Still, Greninja is definitely popular regardless, and in Smash he's cool, and was one of the few Smash 4 newcomers with a nice, straightforward moveset and not some zoning, gimmicky bullshit. He's a very welcome addition. But it's not as though my data isn't also dubious. Anyway, Isabelle ties with Greninja. Even if Isabelle and Villager were competing with each other a bit on these rosters, both ended up making it in the end. We have another tie on the other side. Byleth Eisner, the Ashen Demon, and David, the Solid Snake. Both are bittersweet losses. Byleth's reveal was hated when it happened, but between Three Houses being the best-selling Fire Emblem game, and Byleth's gameplay being a really elegantly designed, straightforward kit, I think Smash fans have generally come to appreciate the Professor, even if they are Fire Emblem Sword Fighter number 8. As for Snake, this one hurts. Snake was the first third-party character, and the triumphant face of Everyone Is Here. Being a third-party addition from one of the more volatile companies, an odd fit for Smash to begin with, and having a pretty obnoxious Zona moveset, I think was enough for Snake to fall just shy of the finish line. Still, we salute you both, Byleth and Snake. The final three, Bayonetta, Little Mac, and Simon Belmont. One will make it, one will fall, and one will be in limbo between. First up, Little Mac makes the roster. The pint-sized pugilist from Punch-Out might be from a dormant series and have an extremely polarizing playstyle that dominates at low level and struggles immensely at the top, but Kid had enough moxie to pull out one more underdog victory. But two remain. Our final character to be cut from the average roster of over 70 lineups is Simon Belmont. The Vampire Slayer performed admirably, a retro addition who was a natural fit for Smash, with Nintendo crossover ties as far back as Captain N the Game Master. Simon was the big third-party addition for Ultimate's launch, and he did it with style. But in the end, not being a particularly common character choice, and competition with his own sexy Echo Fighter, hurt the Barbarian. But the final nail in his coffin? The goddamn worst possible roster video. Simon was the halfway character. He was the limbo himbo. Before that last minute final roster flipped the script on him. Bayonetta should have been dead in his place, but a video deliberately made to imagine a sabotaged Smash roster pulled the rug out from under him. I told you Volderami was the villain of this video. Now go subscribe to him, his video was actually pretty good. With Simon Belmont defeated in the upset of the century, that only leaves Mrs. In Between, Bayonetta. From 89 characters, 44 above her were kept and 44 below her were cut. It seems fitting for a fighter who is popular enough to be cited as a top 5 ballot character and Europe's most wanted Smash fighter, but who has been so strong in implementation that she was actively booed when she was revealed in Ultimate. Bayonetta in Smash represents the highest highs and the lowest lows. But what do we do with her as our halfway point? How do you solve a problem like Cereza? Well, most of the rosters didn't split up Pyra and Mythra, or Pokemon Trainers Reptiles. And in our data, both Pyra and Mythra were cut, while Squirtle, Ivysaur and Charizard all made it. So, if we combine them, it won't mess with the outcomes. Once we do that, we have 43 cut characters and 42 safe characters. Which means Bayonetta is the final character to make our roster. Sorry, Simon Belmont, you really got screwed over, buddy. My bad. And that's the roster. The average of 71 rosters from 70 YouTube channels to hopefully average out to something generally palatable to the Smash community. It's a weird exercise cutting the roster by half, and even with a method designed to iron out the hot takes, we still have some tragic losses and surprising keeps. What do you think? Does this seem like a reasonable way to split half a roster? Would you be okay with this as the baseline of a trimmed down Smash sequel? Has democracy failed and are the people wrong? Does Smash Brothers need an electoral college? But yeah, Smash Smash Brothers is in a really odd place right now. Ultimate's roster was an amazing feat that nobody saw coming, to the point that it feels like it's not sustainable and that the other shoe is about to drop. On top of that, Ultimate's enormous roster is also the game's biggest weakness. The cast feels so bloated, and there's a huge amount of character knowledge needed to understand the game at every level of play, and many legacy fighter designs have been left behind, grown long in the tooth and are in dire need of a fresh coat of paint. A culling feels inevitable and necessary, so it feels like the community is bracing themselves for a storm. Of course, today we looked at the result of 71 rosters, all of which were from YouTubers, who, let's face it, are the lowest rung of society, and their opinions should matter the least. So, I think if we really want to do this right, the only way is to open it up to everyone. I'm gonna make a poll and put it in the description below, so that you, the people, can scream into the void. Now, I only make like 2 videos a year, so I probably won't actually do anything with this data to follow up, but it's something. Maybe I'll post the final results on x.com, the everything app, where even though I never post, I've been getting new followers there pretty much every day, and they're all gorgeous women, and definitely not robots, so it's popping off on Twitter. So go ahead and vote and put your voice out there. Smash community, how would you cut the Ultimate roster in half? I'd like to thank every channel used for this data one more time. They'll all be listed below, and you should subscribe to all 70 of them, but special shoutouts to the most interesting takes on the roster cut concept, which I thought were from Blastbox, Channel Balakay, and Valderrami, so you should watch all those videos. Alright, bye! Here's my personal roster cut, my opinions are bad, bye!